Hey, everybody, welcome to the Players Take episode 289. I'm your host, Justin DeSimone, and I am flying solo this week. So, Montrell's out of town. He's on a business trip, work trip right now, so it's just me. I do have a few news stories to go over, so we'll get through some of that. But in general, life's pretty good right now. It's kind of a quiet week with Montrell out of here. We're not playing as much League, but we did get our friend Brian into League, though. He downloaded it, and we're me and Jed are training him up, getting him ready for the big leagues, playing with real players and stuff like that. So hopefully by the time Montreal gets back, we'll have him to the point where we can maybe make some Smurf accounts and play with him as he learns the game. But so that'll be fun for sure. But all right, well, let me get into the rigmarole here, and then we'll get into the rest of the show. So, for those of you who haven't listened before, this is our weekly show where we talk about video games, video game news, and other topics pertaining to video games. We post at 6 a.m. Central Time on Fridays on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and your favorite podcast app of choice. And if you'd like to send us a question, you can do so on Twitter, or you can send us an email to theplayerstake01@gmail.com. And so like I said, life's pretty good. Playing a lot of games, but mostly just working, playing games. Did play some board games last weekend. That was fun. We played some Twilight Imperium. We didn't end up finishing the game, but we were kind of refamiliarizing ourselves with it because we haven't played it in a very long time. So that was fun. But there were 5 of us, and there was not a ton of action by the end. But I think it was pretty clear who was going to win by the end of it. It was Jet had run away and taken a huge lead by the time we were done. So mostly just gaming and working for the most part. So all right, let me start by getting into what I've been playing this week, since I have been gaming a good amount. Been playing a little bit of League. Not much to say here. I'm not gonna go like super deep on anything. Like I said, we did get our friend Brian into this, so we may actually more consistently have 5 people, which would be nice. I'm because honestly, it's lately it's really just been me, Jet, and Montrell playing, and it's kind of an awkward number of people in League to play with, 3, because you cannot play. You can't play flex. You have to play flex and ranked. Like you can't. There isn't a three person rank queue. It's solos and duos, and then flex. So if you're in flex, you're very likely going to be up against a 5-man pre-made team, which can make it very difficult to play because you're playing with 2 other people you don't know, whereas the whole enemy team knows each other. So. It's not desirable. It's also the queue times are just absurdly long, so we don't really do it. So I'd like us. I'm hoping we can get 5 consistently when we actually start playing ranked more, because I personally prefer ranked to norms. I just think norms are so. I don't know. I don't feel like anybody's really playing super seriously, and that unfortunately just kind of hurts the quality of the games we're playing when we are playing. So still playing League. I did finish Symphony of War, the Nephilim saga, on Sunday, and I was actually wrong. I kept saying this game had 35 chapters. I don't know where I got that number from, but because when I got to chapter 30, it was very obvious that it had final chapter energy to it, where you're fighting this like giant enemy, and the map is huge, and they're just throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you. In that battle, and I was like, wait a second, there are 5 more chapters to this game. This game's over right now. So yeah, I did finish it. And the game's good. Like I said, my opinion hasn't really changed much on it at this point. It's a good game. The gameplay is very fun. I think it's very worthwhile to play. But I do think the story is kind of a little silly and nonsensical, and there's some poor dialogue throughout, but it's nothing like horrible or anything like that, though. It's perfectly serviceable from a narrative standpoint. I think the gameplay is definitely the king here. It's good. I will say the final third of the game, especially especially with the DLC. If you get the DLC, it comes with 8 missions that the game gives you, as well as additional classes and stuff you can play with. It's very worthwhile, but I do think it kind of creates this situation where by the time you hit chapter 20 or so, your army is kind of built out and maxed out for the most part. And you are kind of just playing out the string in terms of the remaining chapters in the game. There's not a lot of progression going on after that point. Like my army was like maximized. They had their final artifact builds, they had their final loadouts. The only thing that was left was maybe filling them out with like one more unit. Like I might have had 8 units in the squad instead of 9, but a lot of my squads were totally full. Like they had no space in them left by that point in the game, and that didn't really change by the very very end of the game either. So I do think the game gets a little long on the tooth by the end, just slightly. It's nothing crazy. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't really think it's a problem for the game necessarily either. So it's just something that I was feeling by the end, but I was actually happy when I hit chapter 30 and realized it was the end. I was like, okay, good, great. So the game's done. I can put it down and move on to something else. So definitely recommend it. I think it's $25 on Steam, something like that. I think the DLC is like 5 or 10. It's nothing crazy. So certainly worthwhile. I think it's worth your time if you're into tactics games, for sure. And I would recommend you guys check it out. So the other thing I've been playing, I think I mentioned this last week, I had started getting into Warcraft 3 again, and I actually decided to start playing the campaign, like actually playing the campaign. So I've gotten through the human campaign and the undead campaigns so far, and I was playing on hard through the human campaign. I did the entire human campaign on hard, and I did the first 3 missions of the undead campaign on hard. And then I decided to switch it down to normal because it just was starting to kind of get on my nerves a little bit. I'm not looking for like a hyper challenge with this. I just kind of want to play through the campaign. I haven't done it in a very long time. So yeah, but the campaign's great. I love Warcraft 3's campaign. I think the story is, for the most part, really good. And I think it's a very fun game to play through in the single player. I do think the playing on hard is definitely something you probably would be specifically looking for if you've played through it least recently and you want a different challenge. I think if you haven't played the game in a long time, it's not really worth playing the game on hard, frankly, because while I think the human campaign was certainly manageable for me, I didn't really have any issues. Like there wasn't a single chapter where I really struggled. On hard, I think maybe chapter 5, I think, which is like a defense mission. Like it's kind of insane by the end of it. But I would say in the undead campaign, it gets really tedious early on, because especially I'd say chapter 3, I would probably assume chapter 4 is probably pretty annoying as well. But the reason is, so chapter 3 sucks because the game, Blizzard, when they were designing this, they usually introduce 1 or 2 units per mission for each faction. Is generally how they do it. So early on, you don't have a lot of units at your disposal, and in Undead's case, by chapter 3, you only have access to ghouls, meat wagons, and necromancers. And if anybody who's played Warcraft 3 would know that is not exactly an amazing army composition to have in the game. Ghouls are extremely weak. They have a fast attack speed, and they do decent damage, but they're extremely fragile. They are super frail. They're so easy to kill. They have like 330 hit points. Like they have no armor. They're super weak. And necromancers are a spellcaster, ranged spellcaster. They don't do a lot of damage on their own, but they are also similarly very low health, low armor, very weak as well. They summon skeletons, which you would think would synergize with the weak ghouls. Like your ghouls die, and then you summon skeletons in their place, but it doesn't work super well on hard, specifically because the AI has access to footmen. They have access to footmen, and then they can actually make like a higher level of footmen that isn't available in multiplayer. They're called captains, basically, that they have. They also have priests, sorceresses. They have ballista that are the kind of the glaive throwers that the night elves have. And then they also have archers who do an absolute fuck ton of damage in this in the campaign. So you end up having a situation where like you have this really non-diverse army, and you're going up against a super diverse army that has spellcasters that can heal, slow, polymorph, like all sorts of crazy shit. And all you have are ghouls and necromancers and meat wagons, and then you have the Death Knight that they give you as your hero for the campaign. And it's just like like when they say hard in that case, it definitely was hard. I beat the mission, but dude, it was super frustrating because you don't have a lot of access to Town Portal in the campaign generally either. Like they don't give you that in the Reign of Chaos campaign. There was a goblin shop on the map that I did end up buying Town Portals from eventually, and had to use them in some cases because, like, dude, yeah, I'd be across the map, my base is getting attacked by this giant army with a hero, and I can't defend it with just towers and like a couple ghouls. It's like you need to actually have like an army there to fight. But then you fight them in your base, and you end up losing most of your units anyways because it's just ghouls and necromancers, and they're super weak. So that mission was really frustrating in particular. I just don't think it's very well designed. They do not give the players the tools to deal with the army composition they are up against on hard, and you just end up having to like slowly. It's kind of this slow slog where you kind of have to destroy every base on the map. Otherwise, you're just not going to be able to attack the main base without getting attacked yourself. That was frustrating enough and took me long enough. I think that mission took me an hour or so to finish, which nothing had taken that long up to this point for me. And that was frustrating enough where I just said, you know what, screw it. I'm going down to normal. I don't want to deal with this. Like, this isn't it just wasn't fun to me. So I decided to put it down to normal, and I ended up blasting through the Undead campaign after that, which was good because it's a very fun campaign. But I think on hard I would have been kind of irritated for sure. There's one mission in particular I kind of want to try on hard, which is the one where you fight a bunch of orc bases. There's like 5 orc bases that you have to deal with, and you get like frost worms for the first time and stuff. I kind of think I want to go back and try to do that mission on hard because that mission is actually really fun. But yeah, I just think the design of the campaign in the Quel'Tha Lost missions is just not. It's not great. You don't have a great army composition to deal with what you're up against most of the time. So, but playing through the campaign is just really fun though. This is so nostalgic for me, like because Warcraft 3 is one of my favorite games of all time, and the campaign is it's very good. Like the story is really cool. The first 2 campaigns, the human and the undead, directly connect to each other. Like the end of the human links into the end of the or the beginning of the undead one, very specifically. It's a really cool kind of arc you see in those 2 campaigns. I don't want to spoil anything, but I think it's worth playing still for the story at this point. I will say the one thing I am feeling though playing through it is obviously I knew this. It's like I played the game plenty of times. But the it's an RTS, right? So you don't have a lot of room for story exposition, I guess I would say. This isn't like StarCraft where you have this like kind of almost like tribunal council meeting happening before every mission where you have like 5 characters talking to each other over comms. This isn't like that. Obviously, this is a fantasy game, so in the cinematics take place on the map. So it's like in the map you're in, you see the characters talking to each other and stuff. And they do kind of try to play it out a little bit more movie-like almost, where like the characters are interacting with each other physically and stuff like that, which is cool. It's cool to see, but Blizzard didn't go crazy with huge amounts of exposition. So you end up having kind of some story beats that do feel a little undercooked at times, where characters kind of make decisions that maybe weren't 100% fully set up. I feel like as much as I still do appreciate it, I do feel that now playing it now is that there might not have been enough build up for specifically the kind of main character's arc. I feel like wasn't as well built up as it could have been. So but it's still good. I don't have a huge problem with it. Like I still love it. it's a great game. I do think the missions. I think the human campaign is largely good overall. For the most part, I do think the undead in the middle, like I said in the Quell to Loss missions, is just it kind of drags. It's a little annoying. You're fighting the same army composition for 3 missions in a row, the same bases, the same buildings, the same situations keep popping up, and you're fighting the same hero over and over and over again for 3 straight missions. That can drag a little bit, but the end of the campaign, the last 3 missions, are really cool. I think mission 6 is awesome. I actually really like mission 8 as well. It's very it's kind of a defense mission, but it's a really hard. It's on normal. It's pretty easy to deal with. It's actually fun to kind of challenge yourself to try to destroy the entire enemy. All the bases on the map. Which is not really the intent of the mission, but you can do it if you're good enough. I was not able to do it. I'm not good enough. I got through 2 of them. I killed 2 of the bases, but I could not kill the 3rd one by the end of the mission, unfortunately. But so yeah, I do think the 7th mission is a little easy actually on normal. It's like you have to kill like 3 heroes, and they're really fragile, like super fragile, and you have like 2 heroes that have these really powerful nuking spells together, and you can just literally walk up to them, cast those 2 spells, and like hit them with a couple autos, and they're fucking the thing you're trying to kill is dead basically. So that mission's pretty easy as a result, but yeah. And then I got to the orc. I just got to the orc campaign, which is really kind of a hard reset, not like a hard reset, but like a very severe tone shift from the first 2 campaigns that are connected to each other. This one is not directly connected right away. It takes some time to connect into the main plot, and I think some players, I did see some stuff on Reddit and stuff, people kind of giving feedback that they don't love the orc campaign as a result, because it just feels like a really slow. The missions are really slow. There's not a lot happening. I actually personally like it, though. It's kind of a break from the main narrative that was happening earlier in the first 2 campaigns. I think it's really nice, and it's really I think it's really necessary for the storyline of the Horde, because it's really taken the Horde in a different direction from Warcraft's 1 and 2. And I think this was kind of a necessary slow point that you needed to have to reestablish the Horde in a different way. Especially for World of Warcraft eventually, and I personally appreciated that myself. So I don't have a problem with it. I actually really like these missions. It's cool. You're kind of getting introduced to a new environment, and the characters don't know where they are, and they're trying to learn this new environment and stuff, and everything's kind of new to them. Like the creatures they're running into are new, and the people they're interacting with are new, and they're different. They're not like the humans they're used to, and stuff like that. So they have like different customs and beliefs and stuff, and it's very interesting from that regard. So there's some cool stuff in the Orc campaign as well. So but with how quickly I blasted through the human and undead, especially now that I'm playing on normal, I think I can get through this like super fast. Like I don't think I'm going to be done all the way with Frozen Throne by like next week, but I don't think I'm going to be on this like super long in terms of doing the campaigns. So, but I mean, honestly, Warcraft 3, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best games ever made, in my opinion. It is, for me, my favorite RTS that I've ever played. It's so different from most RTS games, where RTS games are generally very macro heavy games. StarCraft obviously is like that, where it's just about base building as many units as possible, upgrading your units. Warcraft 3 is just so anti that. That stuff is in the game and is important, but it's not really how you win. Using your hero is the most important part of the game, and the way you utilize your hero and the way you play with your hero, like that is the most important element of the game. Frankly, and especially in multiplayer, will determine your success or failure in multiplayer as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. I don't know if I'm going to get into multiplayer after I'm done with the campaign. I'm in my head, I'm playing with the idea, though. I haven't played Warcraft 3 multiplayer in like over probably 15 years at this point, and I kind of miss it. And there seems to be enough of kind of a hardcore community out there that And frankly, from what I've watched online, I've been watching a lot of Grubby kind of do he has a series called Bronze League Heroes, where he watches low level players play. And seeing those games is definitely giving me some encouragement that I could get back into the game and relearn, because I don't think like that lower tier of players, like I think I can be better than those players. So the fact that that's true means like I think I can get back into the game and kind of relearn the game, and at least get to a point where I'm decent again. Yeah, so I don't know, thinking about it for sure. It'd be kind of cool actually to get some of the guys into the game too, and we could play like 3v3 or 4v4 or do some fun stuff amongst ourselves where we do like free for alls and stuff like that. That would be kind of cool as well. But yeah. All right. So that's all I've been playing this week. I'm gonna take a drink. All right. Let's get into the news. There's actually a decent amount of news to talk about this week, so I'm gonna start with Ubisoft, and this actually happened last week. I didn't see this until this week though, so we're gonna talk about it here. And I've been generally aware of this, but it's gotten to a point where I think it's worth talking about now, where Ubisoft has kind of been cratering the last couple years. Their stock price has fallen over 50% in the last 12 months, and they are right now kind of close to a 10-year low with their stock price, which is obviously that's significant for any publicly traded company. And they're this is kind of attributed to kind of lower than expected sales for Star Wars Outlaws, lower than expected critical reception for Star Wars Outlaws. And then X Defiant is also kind of, it seems like, completely losing its player base, which this game came out not even, I don't know, it was like May that I think X Defiant was coming out, so it hasn't been very long, like 4 months. This game already seems like it might be dead. But things are so bad, however, that some of the shareholders are starting to urge the company to go private. And this was led by a hedge fund named AJ Investments. They had an open letter where they basically were calling for, they want structural changes at Ubisoft, and they're urging them to consider replacing the CEO Yves Guillemot, who's been the CEO, I believe, since Ubisoft began. So that's how dire the situation is, though, is that people don't think, or at least their shareholders are not confident that the company can continue as a publicly traded entity with the way they're operating. And I do think that makes some sense. The idea of going private for them would kind of let them become the masters of their own destiny again. When you're publicly traded as a company, you are beholden to your shareholders at all times with everything you do. And that is not something that every company can handle. Because what that means is you have to drive constant and consistent growth. And you have to drive that for your shareholders for them to get value out of it in the form of dividends or just growth of the stock in general. That's generally what a publicly traded company is trying to do. So in Ubisoft's case, they're doing the opposite of that. They are losing value significantly, very quickly, and that's not good for their shareholders. So going private would allow them to not live in that cycle anymore. Their profits would not be driven by constant growth necessarily. They would be able to drive it in a way that they want, meaning that they could invest in themselves rather than driving growth for a year. They could invest in themselves, invest in infrastructure, invest in new studios, potentially take more risks in the sense of, like, they're not going to go out of business, right? Like they make enough money where they could continue to be a publisher and exist, right? They have big enough IPs with Prince of Persia and Tom Clancy and Assassin's Creed where they can continue to exist, as an entity. It's just that that constant drive for growth requires them to innovate, do new things, really drive sales in a way that Ubisoft I don't think is currently capable of. I just don't feel like they have that I don't know what the word is, like killer instinct really to like push their games over the top, right? Like I don't think anybody I'm not going to sit here and say Assassin's Creed are bad games or the Tom Clancy games are bad games or anything like that, because they're really not. It's just that they're just like missing something though. There's just like a heart to them that they don't have, that doesn't pull me in. They just feel very, I don't know, soulless. A lot of the time whenever I played Assassin's Creed or any of most of Ubisoft's games, they just don't have I just feel like they just are missing something always, usually for me. Prince of Persia has typically been the exception to this for me. That's the one franchise they have of the ones I've played. And frankly, I've only played like 2 or 3 of them. So, this is over a very long period of time too. But Prince of Persia has been the one that I've liked the most. But the Assassin's Creed Odyssey that I played, while a fun game, I just did feel like it just felt like a whole lot of systems thrown together, and I didn't feel like there was like a deeper meaning or intention behind all those systems being thrown together. It just felt like they were trying to make a game, and this is how you make a game. You have to have the RPG mechanics. You have to have this giant open world. You have to have the character choice, the choice-driven dialogue. You have to have these things, even if they didn't necessarily work super well together. And yeah, so I think going private for them would be probably a good start for them to turn things around, because like I said, it allows a company to kind of take back its own destiny. You can have a couple slow years where you're not making a shitload of money, and you can invest during those years into kind of making new things or innovating or taking some risks that might allow you to have huge successes again. So I do think that makes sense. It is interesting though that Yves Guillemot was kind of called out to maybe be replaced, because that would certainly, I think that would be surprising for sure, given that they've been in control for a very long time. But I also think that I don't think he's necessarily a bad leader. It just might be that he's not the right type of leader for a publicly traded company. He might do fine if they went private. He might be the right leader for that situation. So I don't know. This is definitely something to monitor. I do think something's going to happen with Ubisoft sooner than later, because this is something that is probably going to have to be dealt with in some way or another if their share price doesn't turn around at some point in the near future. So this is definitely a situation to monitor. We'll be paying attention to it, and we will certainly talk about it if something else kind of happens with it. All right, moving on. Next story. Actually, I'm going to take a drink. All right, next story. Unity. It's been a minute since we've talked about them, but if you guys remember, this was actually a year ago from when they announced this. They had decided to institute a runtime fee where they were going to charge creators based on how many people installed the game on their devices that had been made with Unity, basically. And Montrell and I had a lot of questions of how they would even do this, like how would this even work? We don't need to get on. I don't need to get into all that, but Unity came out a week ago basically and said that they are doing away with the runtime fee, and they are going back to their per seat subscription model that they've had before. Yeah, I mean, this makes sense, right? That decision kind of really hurt Unity. They lost. John Riccitiello stepped down. Their president left the company earlier this year after that. And they have new leadership. Their CEO is now Matt Bromberg is his name. And I think this is just them trying to right the ship. So this decision makes a lot of sense. However, it may be a situation of too little too late with Unity, because that decision was so damaging that a lot of companies and I think a lot of developers either are currently still in the midst of or already moved their game off of Unity to a different engine, which is a very difficult task. But the amount of trust that they lost with their decision making last year with the runtime, with the changing this model to the runtime fee, I think was so out of the blue and so poorly done, so poorly communicated and executed that I don't think they're going to get people back for making this change, right? Because not only have people, if they've already moved off, they've already put that effort in to move off of Unity. So they're not going to do it again to move back, right? So they're not going to come back. Unity's only hope is that maybe with their next game, they'll bring it back to Unity or a different project that they work on, right? I think the second thing is the fact that they did this last year, the way they did it, kind of makes it hard to trust them going forward, right? Because who's to say that they won't just do the same thing again, in a few years, once they've, like, let's say they grow and they get bigger and bigger and bigger again, and they become like Unreal Engine, where like they're kind of the other engine, and they almost have like they're so big that you can't get off of them, right? You can't live without Unity. At that point, what's to say that they won't try this again? Apple's doing something similar from what I understand, and they're huge. They're like that, right? There's nothing you can do about it. If Apple does something, you kind of have to adhere to it, right? It's like with their freaking charging cables, the lightning cables that they had for a very long time. It literally took the European Union to force them to use USB-C like every other fucking device in the world, So I think it's, that's kind of the risk with Unity. And I think if I was a developer, I wouldn't even bother. Like I wouldn't trust this company anymore. Unreal Engine is just, from what I understand, so much easier to use nowadays than it was, even like 10 years ago. And Epic is great at supporting developers with their use of the engine, and I would just go with that. There's also another engine that popped up or was popping up around the time this happened and is now kind of exploded as a result because a lot of people started putting money into this. Is like Godot, I think is what it's called. It's Godot. That's how it's spelled. And I don't know much about it, but this is another option potentially for developers too. So, I mean, there's like Game Maker and some others like that, some smaller ones. So there's a lot of options out there, and I just don't know why you would go with Unity at this point with the decision they made. They're going to have to spend a long time rebuilding trust after what they did with this. So, but this is the first step, and it's the right step. They needed to do this, but we'll see. We'll kind of see how it pans out. So, all right, moving on. Next story. Square Enix. So there was a financial report back in May 2024 that we talked about, and we heard some quotes and saw some things come out of that, and we talked about that here in the show, I think. But the full report was made public this week, and some stuff came out of it where that we got. I think we saw this in May. I remember us talking about this, but that they confirmed that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI sales were lower than expected and did not make the profit that Square Enix was hoping for. And so I guess I'll speak to that part first. Is I don't really know what Square wants with their games, because I just feel like no matter what game they release and how it does, they're never happy. I think they want every game to be like, a 20 million copy seller or something like that. And I think at this point, like, it's just their leadership really just has to accept the fact that their games are not like, they're just not in that echelon, They're not a Hogwarts Legacy. They don't make games that have that level of appeal, They make JRPGs, and JRPGs are, while they're not a small genre by any stretch of the imagination, they're just not they're not in that upper echelon though. They're not like a Hogwarts Legacy. They're not an Elden Ring, which I understand that's an RPG. It's made by a Japanese developer. Yes, but it's not a JRPG in the way that Square makes them, right? They're like, I don't really consider Elden Ring a JRPG. It's an action RPG. It's its own, it's its own genre. It's a Souls-like, whatever you want to call it. So I just think Square has to be realistic with their games, and that should reflect in the budgets they give these games as well. I mean, they're kind of always a weird studio because they've always tried to push the boundaries of graphics, like always, as far as I've ever played their games. They've always been on the forefront of really pushing graphical fidelity and trying to make their games as beautiful as possible. And while I appreciate that, that also is very expensive to do, especially now. But it's always been expensive, but especially now, it's extremely expensive to make your games as graphically intensive as they make theirs. So you're putting a lot into that, and you're not getting what you want out of it. So maybe, isn't that an indicator that maybe you should dial it back a little bit? Dial it back a little bit and have a little bit more, I don't know, above average graphics. You don't need to go crazy, because if this is the reality every time you release a game is that you're not making the profits you want, then I mean something has to change at some point. Maybe it doesn't necessarily mean that Square is in trouble. I don't think that's the case per se, but clearly they're not making as much money as they want to off of these games. But I mean, they've always been this way, going all the way back to like the Tomb Raider games. They said those underperformed and those sold millions of copies. And it's like, dude, what are you expecting here? And then I think even Deus Ex, they said the same thing for, and it's like, dude, Deus Ex has never been a big seller. Like, what are you expecting here? It's like, so I always think their expectations are out of whack. But one quote that did come out of this that I want to say is their president, Takashi Kiryu, was the one who said this quote. So, quote, "We did not manage our title portfolio across the company as well as we could have, which I believe resulted in opportunity losses due to cannibalization between our own titles." End quote. So this is him talking about releasing games that are competing with each other. And Square has always done this to themselves, but we talked about this a year or two ago where, dude, it was like 2 years ago, I remember, where they were just pooping out RPGs, and it was like tactics games, and like they had like what was it called, the Diofield Chronicles, and then you had Harvest Stella, and you had Tactics Ogre Reborn, and you had the Valkyrie, that new Valkyrie Elysium game. Like all these games came out within a 2-month period of each other, and it's like and there were more than that, than those four or five that I just mentioned. Like there were more than that packed into that 2-month period. And they were just releasing this like string of games. It's like, dude, you're not giving your player base time to digest one and then go to the next one. Like they're having to choose between your games, which is like he says here, cannibalizing, right? I don't think that's been as extreme this last year or two for Square, but it's still been there, and I don't think they space their games out very well, unfortunately. I think Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth had enough space between them for them not to really hurt each other too much, but do you really want games of that caliber though releasing like within 8 months of each other, per se, or 8 or 9 months of each other? Like you kind of want a little bit more spacing than that, I would think, for AAA blockbusters like that. So I don't know. It's like good to hear them say this and actually admit it for once, but at the same time, this is Square. I don't think they're going to change. Square's going to be Square. This was also the report though that mentioned they want to go towards a new multi-platform business strategy, which does make sense for them as well. So yeah. I don't know. It's just, I love Square. I wish they would just, man, I don't know. I just wish they would focus on like they seem like they vacillate between making a shitload of games and making very few games. And I kind of wish they would just fall somewhere in the middle, is make like 2 or 3 really big games that are really high quality, and then make 2 or 3 smaller games that are not as budget intensive. Your Octopath Travelers, your Bravely Defaults, your Tactics Ogre Reborns, stuff like that. and give us smaller games and bigger games. But you don't need to make 25 games at once, like that like we don't need that from Square Enix. I don't think that anybody's asking for that many games from them. It's like there's just not enough time to play them all. So focus on quality over quantity, Square, and I think you will find success in that model. So all right, moving on to our next story. This one, oh my god, this one caught me by surprise. So there was a leak this week from the ESRB of a Horizon Zero Dawn remaster. And we haven't talked about this in a very long while. I'd say the last time I remember mentioning it is when they revealed Lego Horizon on Switch and PlayStation. And I said there, I think I said this, that I thought that this might have been the remaster we all thought was coming. And that this was that was this game. Apparently not. There is actually going to be a real Horizon Zero Dawn remaster, and this is coming off the heels of their announcement of the PS5 Pro last week. But it makes me really curious. Like, is that what this is for? Like, is this about to be announced and we're going to have it by November? Because that would be the only purpose for it, I feel like, to like showcase the PS5 Pro. Because otherwise, I don't really know what the time, like if you release it on any other timing, like later, like next year or something like that, like what is the purpose of this? Like Horizon Zero Dawn is already PS5 compatible. You can play it now, right now, and it looks beautiful. It's on PC and it's a gorgeous fucking game on PC. So I don't really understand what the purpose of remastering this game is. Just like release a patch or something, like a 4K 60 patch for it. I'm just so confused that they want to like resell this game again. Because as much as like I know we had argued about The Last of Us, getting a remaster. That game was from 2 generations ago. That was from PS3, and that was a very that game, while it looked great and played great at the time, it certainly was showing its age from a console from 2 generations ago, from almost pretty much like 15 years prior to when it came out. So, but this isn't the case with Horizon. This game is not even 10 years old. It's like 7 years old. And it's from 1 generation ago, and I think it still looks and plays perfectly adequately. So, I don't know, unless there's something significant here, like they're adding content or changing gameplay systems, or maybe adding some stuff from Horizon 2 into the game to, have it play a little bit better. I'm just not seeing a whole lot of purpose to this personally. And if they have the balls to charge $60 for this, I think they're crazy personally. I don't know. It's crazy, but I think if they're going to announce it, it's going to be soon. Like, it's got to be soon. I feel like this has to be a PS5 Pro game. So we'll see. We will certainly cover it if they do announce it, if and when they do announce it. All right, moving on. Final story this week. We had talked about it when the game came out, Palworld, how this game was really flirting with disaster. Nintendo's famously litigious, and Montrell and I have been continuously surprised that nothing came of it for a while, but apparently Nintendo's just kind of been biding their time, building up a case, building up something, and they did it this week. They have they've issued a lawsuit against Pocketpair, saying that they are infringing on Nintendo's patents, and Pocketpair has actually responded to the lawsuit. So here's the full statement. Quote, regarding the lawsuit, yesterday, a lawsuit was filed against our company for patent infringement. We have received notice of this lawsuit and will begin the appropriate legal proceedings and investigations into the claims of patent infringement. At this moment, we are unaware of the specific patents we are accused of infringing upon, and we have not been notified of such details. Pocketpair is a small indie game company based in Tokyo. Our goal as a company has always been to create fun games. We will continue to pursue this goal because we know that our games bring joy to millions of gamers around the world. Palworld was a surprise success this year, both for gamers and for us. We were blown away by the amazing response to the game, and have been working hard to make it even better for our fans. We will continue improving Palworld and strive to create a game that our fans can be proud of. It is truly unfortunate that we will be forced to allocate significant time to matters unrelated to game development due to this lawsuit. However, we will do our utmost for our fans and to ensure that indie game developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. We apologize to our fans and supporters for any worry or discomfort that this news has caused. As always, thank you for your continued support of Palworld and Pocketpair. End quote. So, I do think this response is a little weird. That they are kind of whining that they have to go to court. Basically, they're like, "Oh, it's truly unfortunate that we will be forced to allocate significant time to matters unrelated to game development due to this lawsuit." And then also saying that we will do our utmost for our fans and to ensure that indie game developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. Like, they are really taking this as like an affront to the entire indie game industry within video games, which is, I find that to be funny. That's kind of the implication there. Maybe this was translated and mistranslated. I don't know, but that's kind of weird wording for that, right? They also call themselves a small indie game company. While that is true, or was true before the game came out, this is also a company that has made millions and millions and millions and millions, like hundreds of millions of dollars at this point. I don't know if I would call them a small indie game company anymore after that. So just a few weird wordings on this statement here. But to get into the main thing, the main issue here, I think I was expecting this at some point. I was surprised it didn't happen more quickly, but I'm not surprised it's happening now because this game is really flirting with infringement, I think. Like, there's just so many designs that are so fucking close to Pokemon designs. It's pretty bonkers, dude. Like, I don't know. And it doesn't surprise me that Nintendo went here, like, did this, you know. There's just a lot of these pals that just look like they're like different parts of Pokemon stitched together to make something else, and I don't know. It's a little too eerie. Like, IGN, the article I have here for the reporting on this from IGN, like, has some side-by-side pictures of some of the pals versus Pokemon that they look like, and it's fucking uncanny, dude. Like, some of these are just so overtly kind of taken. I don't know. It's hard to believe that there wasn't some kind of, not copying, but the inspiration is just too close. It's too close. So I feel like Nintendo legitimately probably has a case here. And I think the only thing that's going to save Pocketpair here is that the gameplay is significantly different from any Pokemon game we've ever seen. You know, and we'll see what comes of it. I don't know if it's like, you know, Nintendo gets damages or something and Pocketpair has to pay a portion of their profits, you know, to Nintendo or something like that. Or if they're forced to change some of the PAL designs, you know, to be more original. That would be very interesting as well to see what comes of it. So this is something I'm going to be definitely paying attention to and monitoring. I will say too, you know, obviously, you know, I have no legal authority or knowledge really specifically beyond, you know, a layman's perspective on this, but Rick Hogue is an actual lawyer, and he has a YouTube channel called Hogue Law, where he covers some video game stuff, and I'm sure he will cover this at some point. But I do remember hearing him talk about this on a podcast, and he mentioned that he was surprised. He was certainly surprised that there wasn't a lawsuit from Nintendo on this. That he thought they had a case, certainly, to a case for something like this. So we will see how this plays out. I am highly interested in this. I don't necessarily like. I don't really feel anything on either side of this. You know, Nintendo's gonna Nintendo. They're litigious. They're famously litigious. They do this all the time. And Pocketpair, I do think Pocketpair was kind of playing with fire a little bit with some of this stuff. So we will see on that front. But whenever something comes of this, we will definitely be covering it here on the show for sure. So, all right, everybody. Well, that's all I had today. That is all the news we had. Montrell will be back next week, and we will have a regular show as per usual, and we will cover all the news as we normally do. So, if you like this episode, please like the show, subscribe to the show, and review the show on whatever feed you're listening to it on. And please subscribe to us on YouTube. If you'd like to interact with either of us on Twitter, you can do so at iTrap for the Hokage for Montrell. That is the number 4, not the word. I'm at ThunderNut01, and the show is at The Player's Take. If you'd like to send us a question that we will answer on the show, you can do so on Twitter, or you can send us an email to theplayerstake01@gmail.com. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.